We continue our exploration of George Gilder's Life After Capitalism, which is the sixth and final part of the interpretation. Earlier, we discussed Gilder's fierce criticism of the modern financial system, considering it a self-aggrandizing, disruptive high-entropy system that interferes with useful market information. The central issue here is money. The final part of the book describes Gilder's ideal currency based on the concept from information economics that money is time. My impression after reading is that Gilder presents more of a vision than a blueprint. Currently, including digital currencies like Bitcoin, no currency meets all of Gilder's requirements. Gilder believes that Web 3.0 could fulfill his wish list, but I find these desires overly idealistic, perhaps containing conflicting elements or falling into what some call the impossible trinity. These questions remain for the future. The key of this section is that, through Gilder's perspective, you can gain a deeper understanding of what money really is. You'll find that some things commonly accepted as natural aren't necessarily so. To aid understanding, let me share a story from ancient China. Nowadays, we all assume that issuing currency is the government's responsibility. No matter how capable an entrepreneur is, they can't say, "Let me mint a currency and let everyone use it, as long as they like it." But you might be surprised to learn that, in ancient China, there was a time when private individuals could mint various currencies, and people freely competed, choosing which currency to use based on reputation. This was during the period before Emperor Wu of the Western Han dynasty. Coming out of a period of turmoil, there was a severe shortage of currency. The half-ounce coins left by the previous dynasty, the Qin dynasty, were not very practical. With the central government unable to organize large-scale coinage, they decided to allow private minting. During this time, both the central government, local governments, and private individuals could mint coins, resulting in a wide variety of currencies. Doesn't that throw things into chaos, you might say? Not really. Free competition quickly drove out the inferior currency, and the people naturally gravitated towards primarily two types of money. One was the copper coins produced by the state of Wu, and the other was coins minted by a politician from the central court named Deng Tong. These two types of currency were of good quality and trustworthy, so they circulated widely throughout the land. During this period, which was known as the Reign of Wen and Jing, it was a golden age of economic development in Chinese history. Modern economists would surely praise this period, as it was characterized by a free market economy. China had a small government, high living standards, and a vibrant community of wealthy individuals and heroes. However, this period did not last long because the central government sought more power, and Emperor Wu needed funds. The most straightforward way for a centralized government to raise funds is to monopolize the issuance of currency. If you're the only one minting coins, you don't need to guarantee quality, and in fact, you might lower it. Emperor Wu introduced various new coins over time, including leather coins, platinum coins, 3-zhu coins, 5-zhu coins, and red-side 5-zhu coins, initially alongside local currencies. Eventually, the central government monopolized currency issuance entirely, and the quality of money deteriorated. It was akin to imposing an inflation tax, directly on the people. Subsequent Chinese emperors standardized the practice of plundering private wealth through increased currency issuance, until lessons were learned during the Ming and Qing dynasties, which stabilized the financial order with a silver standard. However, later, the Kuomintang also overissued currency, only to be swiftly abandoned by the Chinese people. The lesson from Chinese history seems to be that the power to mint coins must be held by the central government to some extent, giving the government some room for macroeconomic manipulation. But this manipulation must be very cautious to maintain currency stability. This lesson is acknowledged by mainstream economists. In 1988, Gilder and the doyen of the Chicago School of Economics, Milton Friedman, visited China together. China was vigorously reforming and opening up at the time, eagerly seeking advice. Several books recount different aspects of this visit. Gilder's version focuses on China's rapid economic growth but facing significant inflation pressure, asking the two scholars for advice. Friedman's advice was that the crisis was serious, but inflation was entirely determined by the money supply. If you control the money supply, you're fine. Friedman also suggested that China adopt a floating exchange rate. If you can adjust currency issuance as needed, you must allow the exchange rate to float. Gilder's advice, on the other hand, was that controlling the money supply wasn't the key. Rather, the key was to deregulate businesses and let Chinese enterprises develop freely. With increased economic activity, inflation wouldn't be a concern. In hindsight, that year did see severe inflation in China, but the government ultimately did not adopt Friedman's advice. Instead, they pegged the RMB to the US dollar, relinquishing arbitrary currency issuance, to stabilize the currency. Subsequently, the government further loosened restrictions on businesses, and fortunately, things evolved in line with Gilder's suggestion. Gilder argues that Friedman was mistaken in believing that the velocity of money circulation remains constant. There's a recognized formula. MV equals PT, meaning money supply times velocity of circulation equals price of goods times volume of transactions. If the velocity of money circulation remains constant, the government can stimulate economic activity by expanding the money supply or stabilize the economy by reducing the money supply when it overheats and experiences severe inflation. Friedman provided theoretical support for central banks to conduct monetary policy. This principle is intuitive, but real-world experience doesn't always align. In reality, the velocity of money circulation is closely related to the economic situation. During economic downturns, people are unwilling to spend money, and even if the government increases the money supply significantly, it won't boost economic activity. Conversely, during economic booms, when people are already inclined to spend, and the market needs more money, reducing the money supply can disrupt the situation. In 2003, 3 years before his death, Friedman acknowledged that his monetarist theory might not be correct. Gilder, however, firmly believes that centralized control of currency issuance by the government is not a good idea. Information economics holds that money should be a low-entropy entity. It must be stable and predictable, not prone to fluctuations that play havoc with entrepreneurs. During the era of the gold standard, when governments couldn't arbitrarily issue currency, it was also a period of global trade expansion, high-speed growth in capitalist economies, a time when central banks weren't really needed, and currencies of various countries automatically exchanged without fluctuation. That was good money. Gilder believes that governments cannot truly control money under any circumstances. Short-term control will only lead to future crises. You cannot arbitrarily determine the value of a currency and expect people to automatically agree with that value. Looking at it now, using gold as currency has prominent advantages. First and foremost is the natural trust it garners. People all over the world cherish gold. It's difficult to counterfeit, never corrodes, looks good, and regardless of where it's mined, its quality remains the same. It's worthy of admiration. Moreover, gold is limited. Including historical mining up to the present day, the global inventory of gold is only 206,000 tons. And about 3,000 tons can still be mined annually, equivalent to a yearly growth rate of 1.5%, which is much lower than the global GDP growth rate. It won't depreciate. Even better, anchoring to gold doesn't prevent governments from issuing more currency. It just prevents them from doing so arbitrarily. As long as you can ensure that anyone can exchange $1 for a certain amount of gold, people will believe in the value of the dollar, regardless of how much you actually issue. During the Industrial Revolution, the total world gold supply only increased by 3.4 times, while the U.S. money supply increased by 163 times. This is actually a good thing. As market economic activity increases, the money supply should increase. As long as people continue to believe in the value of money. But Gilder doesn't advocate return to the gold standard, because gold has a troublesome attribute. It is also a commodity. Gold can be used for jewelry, decoration, and is now indispensable in many electronic products. Gold itself has utility. Since it is a commodity, its price will fluctuate with market supply and demand, it cannot maintain low entropy, and it cannot reliably be used to measure the value of other commodities. You cannot use a commodity to measure commodities, otherwise, wouldn't it be barter? From the perspective of information economics, Gilder's ideal currency needs to meet the following conditions. 1. It must be low entropy, ideally like measures of length and time, with no inherent fluctuations, providing stable measurement for goods. 2. It cannot be a commodity. 3. Its value must be widely recognized. 4. It must be beyond government control. 5. Its supply must fluctuate with changes in economic activity, requiring it to be very limited in the short term and perpetually expandable in the long term. Bitcoin meets some of these requirements, but its volatility is too high. Sometimes, its value can fluctuate by 20% within a day. Nobody would use such a currency to buy things. The problem lies in Satoshi Nakamoto possibly being too averse to inflation, setting a limit for Bitcoin. The algorithm gradually slows down the rate of Bitcoin mining, and by the year 2141, a total of 21 million Bitcoins can theoretically be mined worldwide. And 19 million of them have already been mined. Considering that some are lost, the total supply of Bitcoin is extremely limited. Just think, even gold can increase by 1.5% per year. This means that Bitcoin is a speculative asset rather than a suitable currency. Rational currency supply should reflect economic conditions, ensuring stable value, rather than forcibly setting scarcity. So, what kind of currency would meet Gilder's requirements? While Gilder opposes Bitcoin, he still acknowledges blockchain technology. The basic principle of blockchain is that it's a distributed ledger. Every transaction record is stored on every computer in the network, making transaction records unchangeable and therefore absolutely trustworthy. Moreover, blockchain is decentralized, theoretically immune to government intervention. Even better, blockchain aligns with Gilder's idea that money is time because transaction records automatically reflect time. Additionally, each person has a unique identity on the blockchain, greatly reducing the possibility of hacking. Gilder never explicitly states it, but after reading for some time, I feel that the current circulation of the currency he envisions, based on blockchain, should be determined by the density of recent transaction records. If there are many transactions now, indicating increased economic activity and thus a greater need for money, you should issue more. But I can't be certain. Gilder believes that Web 3.0 can achieve this ideal currency, but there's no specific plan yet. I don't believe any government would welcome Gilder's envisioned new currency. Politicians are more interested in their own power than economic growth. Coinage is a particularly important government power. In the days when counties in the Western Han Dynasty could freely mint coins, the central government wasn't happy. But reality is reality, and ideals are ideals. At the very least, you need to know what a better situation could be like. Information economics has several interesting implications we haven't discussed in detail. For example, governments shouldn't oppose business monopolies because any moment of innovation is necessarily a monopoly. This is akin to the theory of evolution. Innovation isn't about intensifying competition but avoiding it, finding new niches. What should truly be opposed are institutionalized monopolies protected by the government, preventing others from competing. Also, the trade deficit is a false problem. Developing countries sell goods to the United States, receive dollars but don't buy an equivalent amount of U.S. goods. Instead, they invest in U.S. assets. This is not only not bad for the U.S., but it's good. Capital flows reflect information, and the U.S. capital market is full of information. There's historical experience here. The poorer and weaker China was, the more it ran a trade surplus, and the richer and stronger it became, the more it ran a trade deficit. And so on and so forth. This book concludes here. Gilder's optimism is not baseless. Behind it lies scientific thought and revolutionary ideas. Capitalism isn't a finished product. It's a work in progress, and some things take a long time to understand. Regardless of how much of the book's content you agree with, I dare say that the era has changed considerably compared to what we imagined capitalism to be decades ago.
If you feel there is value in this, please like, subscribe to this channel, and leave your thoughts or suggestions in the comments section. Let's grow together and read more good books.